I married the notorious and powerful minister Jing Heng in my sister's stead. My legitimate sister, though doted upon by the entire family, was mute. Thus, I had no choice but to feign muteness as well. On the wedding night, I waited in the chamber until I nearly fell asleep when finally someone pushed the door open, and the bridal veil was lifted. Looking up, I saw a face so handsome it seemed unreal. The words "so hot" were about to slip from my lips when I suddenly remembered my current persona. Oh right, I'm supposed to be mute now, so I could only gaze at him longingly, trying to convey my thoughts through my eyes. Jing Heng's eyes slightly lifted at the corners as he reached out to tilt my chin upward, studying me carefully as if examining a fine piece of art. I heard the lady fell seriously ill 3 years ago and has lost her voice. I suppose she can't speak of her pain now, can she? Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. I panicked instantly. With his notorious reputation, could he have some unspeakable, terrifying fetish? As I was thinking this, he chuckled softly and spoke again. However, I've heard that even those who cannot speak can at least make some indistinct sounds. After my elder sister became mute, I only saw her once on the eve of this substitute marriage, so I wasn't very familiar with her current state of vocalization. Hearing Jing Heng say this, I took it as truth and thus hummed a couple of affirmative sounds. He suddenly laughed, his eyes like glazed cups reflecting light, dazzlingly bright and brimming with tenderness. He lowered his head to kiss me, murmuring vaguely, "This should suffice." My face suddenly burned crimson with heat. In the capital, rumors about Jing Heng were countless. He was the half-brother of the current emperor, but because his birth mother was out of favor, he was despised by the late emperor and even wandered among the common people at the age of 12. It wasn't until 4 years later, when the late emperor fell critically ill, that he was finally brought back. After his first 2 wives died suddenly on their wedding nights, he came to our door again to propose marriage to my elder sister. Rumor has it that during his years of poverty, my arrogant elder sister had once humiliated him publicly on the street, treating him like a beggar. Recalling his vindictive nature, I trembled with fear and instinctively closed my eyes. The next moment, he suddenly stopped, afraid. He pinched the flesh at the nape of my neck, then gently tucked my sweat-dampened hair behind my ear. "If you're uncomfortable, just tell me," I scoffed inwardly, knowing full well my current persona was that of a mute girl, yet still pretending to care by asking me to speak. "What do you mean?" With my life on the line, the candlelight flickered as he gripped my chin. His tone inexplicably emotional. "Madam, you should open your eyes and look at me." My eyelashes fluttered slightly, and in the end, I opened my eyes to gaze at him. Jing Heng possessed an exceptionally striking face, his skin fair, his pupils dark and deep as mountain pools, unfathomable in their depths. A misty drizzle seemed to perpetually veil the corners of his eyes and brows, his thin lips perpetually curved upward in a deceptively harmless smile. Yet there wasn't a soul in the capital unaware of his methods. 2 years prior, the Prince of Chang from the southwestern province had secretly entered the capital with his trusted aides, plotting to assassinate the 13-year-old emperor and seize the throne. Unfortunately for them, before they could act, Jing Heng had apprehended them all. It said the screams from the imperial prison lasted 3 days and 3 nights, when Prince Chang's corpse was carried out. Not a single patch of unblemished flesh remained on his body. My legitimate elder sister Tang Tingyu had been spoiled into arrogance since childhood by our father and his principal wife. Back then she could still speak like a normal person. When Jing Heng merely passed by her carriage, she grabbed a handful of copper coins and threw them at his feet, saying with a bright smile, "If you're out here begging, you ought to lower your stance, kowtow to show your gratitude. And this money shall be yours." So proud yet so foolish, Jing Heng's face, even in tattered clothes, still couldn't conceal his noble bearing. She resented that a beggar didn't feel ashamed in her presence and humiliated him at will. Yet in the end, I was the one who suffered the consequences. Damn it, I'm so wronged. Seeing me gaze at him so limply, Jing Heng fell silent for a moment before suddenly letting out a soft chuckle and raising his hand to cover my eyes. "Don't look at me like that, my lady." His voice carried what sounded like a sigh. "I nearly forgot how utterly fearless you used to be. Those copper coins you bestowed upon me that day, I picked up each one carefully. and to this day, I've kept them all safe and sound. So it was true, he had come for revenge. My face turned pale with fright. Would I be the third to die suddenly on my wedding night? Yet Jingheng didn't kill me. Instead, he grew even gentler, letting me ride the long, meticulous waves until dawn lightened the sky. I woke up at noon the next day, supporting my sore and weak waist as I walked to the dressing table, staring at the faint dark circles under my eyes in the mirror. I came to a conclusion. Jingheng wasn't planning to take my life, for now. Perhaps he intended to torment me slowly, like boiling a frog in warm water. In the following days, my suspicions were indeed confirmed. Jingheng is like a male demon who sucks the life out of people. My waking time gets later and later each day, yet he grows more refreshed and energetic with each passing day. That noon, before I could even wake up properly, he dragged me out of bed for lunch after returning from court. Still half asleep, I noticed him dropping something into my bowl, then heard his voice. "My lady, do try today's newly made stuffed cucumber with minced pork." Cucumber is the vegetable I detest most. Picking up my chopsticks, I mumbled drowsily, The words "I don't like cucumbers" were on the tip of my tongue when a sudden jolt of realization snapped me awake. My current identity was Tang Tingyu, who couldn't speak, so I swallowed those words forcefully, forcing out an obedient smile instead. Then, suppressing my agony, I gulped down the enormous piece of stuffed cucumber Jingheng had placed in my bowl. He propped his chin on his hand, looking at me leisurely. "Does my wife wish to speak with me?" I shook my head, then nodded. So Jingheng motioned for a servant to bring paper and brush. I wrote swiftly on the rice paper. "My husband toils daily with state affairs. Surely it must be exhausting." He glanced over and said with a faint smile, "Not bad. Why is my wife suddenly concerned about me? As your wife, it's only right that I pay more attention to your health." I paused, then finally wrote down my true intention. "For the sake of your well-being, perhaps you should consider moderation." Before I could finish writing, Jingheng grabbed my wrist and pulled me over abruptly. The curtains closed, dimming the light before me as he looked down from above, the corner of his lips curling. So soon after our wedding, to have made my wife harbor such doubts. This husband is at fault. I stared at him in disbelief, trying to condemn his inhumanity with my gaze. Yet he covered my eyes with his hand and said with a soft laugh, "Wife, don't look at me like that. I would feel heartbroken." Jingheng's psychology is definitely not normal. When I woke up the next day, he was already gone. Even Xiao Chun, the maidservant who came with me as part of my dowry, had disappeared without a trace. A strange woman stood in the room. She curtsied to me and said respectfully, "My lady, this servant is Xiao. His Highness has commanded that from today onward, I shall attend to you." I looked at her. She cleverly brought paper and brush. What would my lady like to instruct? Where is my dowry maid? His Highness has assigned her to other important matters. Does my lady wish to dress? This humble servant will attend to you. Xiao helped me to the dressing table and opened the jewelry box. What ornaments would my lady like to wear? This servant will do your hair. Staring at the contents of the box, I suddenly felt somewhat dazed. These are all things Tang Tingyu didn't want. Before the wedding, my stepmother summoned me to her chamber and said with detached calm, "By rights, since you're taking Tingyu's place in this marriage, we should provide you with a dowry. But after what your birth mother did, your father still can't let it go. As your proper mother, I naturally must consider your future." I said nothing, merely keeping my head bowed in deference. She summoned Tang Tingyu and had her open the jewelry box, picking out the pieces she didn't like to give to me. When a younger sister marries, as the elder sister, you should at least fill a box for her dowry. This was far from a dowry gift. It was clearly a warning that only what Tang Tingyu disliked or discarded could be mine, and that I should harbor no delusions beyond my station. I am the illegitimate daughter of the Tang family. My birth mother was out of favor, so my father didn't like me either. By the age of 10, I still didn't have a proper maiden name. My mother gave me a pet name, Yang Yang. Later, when my mother was discovered having an affair, she was beaten to death, though I narrowly escaped with my life. From now on, I was no longer a daughter of the Tang family, but was raised as a lowly maidservant in the backyard. If it weren't for Jingheng suddenly proposing to marry Tang Tingyu, and her unwillingness to suffer the humiliation of this marriage. The Tang family would probably never have remembered me until their dying day. Lost in thought, Showa brought another rosewood box and placed it open before me. Coming back to my senses, I looked down and saw the box filled to the brim with gold, silver, and jade, so dazzling it nearly blinded me. The prince said that the princess's maternal family is of modest means, and the princess has refined taste. The jewelry she brought likely wouldn't suit her. So he specially ordered these to be selected from the treasury. If the princess isn't satisfied, she may personally go and choose another day. Of modest means, what a tactful way to put it. Actually, he was trying to subtly mock the Tang family for being poor, wasn't he? If the real Tang Tingyu heard Jing Heng's evaluation of her beloved jewelry, wouldn't she be furious enough to drop dead? I smiled faintly, casually picking a gold-wrapped pearl hairpin from the box and handing it to Showa. She was also considerate enough to tie up my hair for me before going to prepare breakfast. She looked like just an ordinary little maid, if she hadn't revealed the dagger hidden at her waist when she turned around. Stepping out the door, in the courtyard stood two young gatekeepers, their palms and knuckles bearing faint calluses. One wore a long sword at his waist, the other carried a 9-section whip. When he looked at me, his expression carried a piercing chill. Thinking of Jing Heng's 2 previous wives who had died suddenly, I felt an even deeper chill creeping up from the pit of my stomach. What if one day he's in a bad mood and just kills me off? I waited in fear and trepidation for several days, but Jing Heng never appeared. Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer and wrote to Showa, "It's been days since I last saw my husband. Has he been occupied with important matters? His Highness would surely be delighted to know the princess misses him so." Showa spoke with a worried expression, but the prince was ordered to leave the capital on official business. He's been out of contact for 2 days now, and I heard he was injured before his disappearance. Hearing her words, I couldn't help but show joy on my face, only for a tall, straight figure to stride through the door the next moment, carrying with him the damp scent of blood. The smile on my lips froze before I could retract it. Jing Heng removed his rain-soaked cloak and strode up to me. Reaching out to grasp my wrist, his fingertips were icy cold, his complexion pale from blood loss, and the smile in his eyes seemed obscured by mist, not quite clear. With a slight exertion, he pulled me directly into his embrace, his tone carrying a hint of amusement. "What's this? Hearing of my injury? My wife seems rather delighted." I couldn't help but suspect this man had been eavesdropping outside the door the whole time. Otherwise, how could his timing be so impeccably coincidental? He buried his face in the crook of my shoulder and sighed softly. "I was away on business, but my thoughts were only of you. I traveled day and night to rush back, yet to see you act this way truly breaks my heart." Like hell I believe him. There wasn't a trace of sorrow in his voice. I raised my head and gave Showa a look, signaling her to fetch paper and brush. Unexpectedly, she misunderstood my intention and hastily spoke up. "Your Highness must know that while you were away, the princess was constantly worried and anxious in the manner, so distressed about your safety that she couldn't even eat. Now that she sees you've returned unharmed, her face has finally brightened with joy. You mustn't misunderstand the princess's sincere devotion. Showa truly lived up to her name. She's truly outstanding." I couldn't tell whether Jing Heng actually believed me, but after a moment of silence, he finally raised his face and gave me a slight smile. "Has my wife truly been this worried about me?" I swallowed my sarcastic retort and, covering my conscience, nodded solemnly. The clouds in his eyes suddenly dissipated, shining bright as stars in an instant, while his arms held me even tighter. "In that case, I've truly troubled my wife to worry and toil for me." I shook my head, took his hand and pressed it against my cheek, deliberately nuzzling it with feigned affection. As the atmosphere in the room grew warmer, Showa discreetly led the other servants away. I opened my mouth but remained silent, just about to point at the paper and pen on the table when Jing Heng suddenly scooped me up and placed me on the soft couch in the side chamber. He still carried the damp chill peculiar to rainy days, which now coiled around me. A scream caught in my throat. But since Tang Tingyu was mute, I dared not make a sound. Pointing at the still bleeding wound on Jing Heng's shoulder, I forced out 2 teardrops. His movements suddenly halted. "Is my lady grieving for me?" Jing Heng reached out, wiping away those 2 teardrops from the corner of my eye. The dark desire in his gaze suddenly faded, replaced by a trace of lingering tenderness. Why was I crying? Was I crying for the wounded Jingheng? Or for myself, who still had to flatter and carefully please even when facing his injured state? The sky outside gradually darkened, and Jingheng and I maintained this posture for the duration of 2 cups of tea. My neck ached from tilting back, yet his kiss never came. Self-pity wasn't in my nature. That moment of dejection vanished as quickly as it appeared. I wriggled out from under Jingheng, grabbed paper and brush, and began writing furiously. I'm deeply concerned about your Highness's health. Perhaps we should summon a physician to examine your pulse and tend to your wounds. A damp, chilly wind blew in through the doorway, making the dim candlelight flicker and dance. Jingheng sat up, propping his chin on his hand, his smile not reaching his eyes. This trip out of the capital was ordered by His Majesty in secret. No one can know about it, so naturally, I can't call for a physician to take my pulse. I strongly suspected he was lying to me. In the vast regent's residence, with the regent holding such immense power in the court, how could there not be a single trustworthy physician available? So, I'll have to trouble my wife to apply the medicine for me. Not trouble, just my wretched fate. I fetched the golden wound medicine, and when I turned back, Jingheng had already removed his robe, revealing the deep, bone-exposing wound on his shoulder. The sight of his torn flesh made my temple twitch, as if my own shoulder was already aching. Yet when my gaze traveled downward, I saw he possessed an exceptionally fine physique. His skin bore a bloodless pallor, yet his muscle definition was both striking and sharply delineated. I'd merely stolen a few dozen extra glances when he asked me, "Since my lady seems so fond of looking, why not wait until my wounds heal? We could light a lamp in the tent and let you admire me to your heart's content all night long." The golden wound medicine melted on my warm fingertips before I carefully applied it to Jingheng's injury. He let out a muffled groan. The once formidable regent, who was said to not even blink when blades pierced bone, suddenly appeared utterly vulnerable. For as long as I tended to his wound, he kept whimpering, until finally even resorting to coquetry. "My lady, the pain is truly unbearable. Might I rest my head upon your heart for a while?" I was drenched in sweat, unsure whether from the heat or from holding back. Hearing this, I instinctively sensed something was wrong. Lowering my gaze, I saw Jingheng's face flushed with an unnatural redness. Reaching out to touch his forehead, I was shocked by its terrifying heat. Torn between letting his fever rage on and going out to call for help, I resigned myself to propping him securely against the inner side of the couch before stepping out to summon Shoa. There's no way around it. If he truly became fever-stricken while with me, those highly skilled servants in the courtyard probably wouldn't let me walk out of this room alive. Just as Jingheng had recovered from his illness, the Tang family suddenly sent someone to say that my legal mother was seriously ill, longing to see her daughter, and hoped I would return for a visit. Seriously ill? That's just perfect. I nearly failed to suppress my joy. But then my gaze shifted. Jingheng was looking straight at me. "You must be terribly worried, my lady. In that case, you should return home." I had no choice but to force a concerned expression onto my face. "Only, it's a pity that pressing matters prevent me from accompanying you home." He approached, reached out to straighten my collar, then lightly caressed my cheek before planting a kiss there. "Return home early, my lady, and spare me the pangs of longing." When I returned to the Tang family, I discovered that my stepmother wasn't actually ill. Not only was she perfectly healthy, she even had the leisure to scrutinize me and ask, "How has the regent treated you since your marriage?" Novel collection Pushpin QQ Group 1 04128 926 3. I knew they wouldn't want to hear the real answer, so I took a deep breath and sobbed. My elder sister used to treat him with such contempt, and now he torments me day and night. I can hardly get a full meal, and there isn't a single patch of unbruised skin left on my body. Tang Tingyu eyed me with satisfaction and suspicion, while the maid Yunqiu behind her chimed in dutifully. But this servant notices the second young lady seems to have plumped up a bit. I stiffened slightly. Perhaps it's just swelling from hunger. After idle chatter for what felt like ages, I finally grew impatient and asked, "Since mother is in good health, why was I summoned back to the estate to visit her?" The mother and daughter exchanged a glance before the lark retreated, thoughtfully closing the door behind her. Once the room held only the three of us, Tang Tingyu produced a white jade vial from her sleeve and slid it toward me. My brow twitched. What is this? Jingheng is cruel and ruthless. The way he tormented you as your rightful mother, even I couldn't bear to see it. The legal mother spoke. Find an opportunity to mix this into his food. Once the deed is done, someone will bring you back to the Tang residence, where you'll enjoy a lifetime of wealth and honor. Someone, I curled my lips slightly, masking the mockery in my voice. Is eldest sister getting married? Of course. The legal mother's face flashed with a hint of triumph. The heir of the Chongning Marquisate has already sent someone to propose. Now she is no longer your eldest sister, but your younger half-sister who was raised on the estate, Tang Ningyu. Playing with the wind and admiring the moon, she is as precious as pearls and jewels. Her name carries beautiful blessings and blooming romance. Even after swapping identities with me, she effortlessly attains everything I could never reach. Lost in thought, I fell silent for a moment. My stepmother thought I was unwilling and immediately changed her expression. If you delay Ningyu's good marriage, those few belongings your concubine mother left in the mansion need not remain either. Burning them all would be cleaner. I raised my eyes to look at her. Mother is threatening me. She stood up, looking down at me from her superior position. Tang Xiaoer, your worthless life. If this succeeds, not only will your stepmother's belongings be returned, but even her innocence can be restored. But if it fails, do you think the regent would let you live to see tomorrow if your impersonation were discovered? The legal mother left first, leaving only me and Tang Tingyu in the room. She remained seated, her face, bearing a 70% resemblance to mine, appearing serene and composed. She dipped her fingertip in the tea and wrote stroke by stroke on the table. Little sister, this is your fate. Even if you've taken my place now, you can never truly become me. When I left the Tang household, I ultimately took that jade vial with me. In the carriage on the return journey, I held the jade vial, deep in thought, though Jingheng held immense power at court. He had also made many enemies and faced opposition from all sides. The Marquis of Chongning, who is now to marry Tang Ningyu, is one of them. The maternal clan of the seventh prince, the current emperor's own brother, originates from the lineage of the Marquis of Chongning. So, the poisoning of Jingheng, was it ordered by the Marquis of Chongning, or? I dared not think further. When I returned, the sky had already darkened, and Jingheng was actually still waiting to have dinner with me. Perhaps noticing my absent-mindedness, he reached over and took my hand. What's wrong, my lady? Is your mother's condition very serious? I shook my head and sighed. If only it were truly her illness that was severe. I simply must get a bottle of wine to celebrate. Jingheng instructed Xiaoer nearby to fetch paper and brush. After hesitating for a moment, I still picked up the brush to write. After I left home to marry, my parents brought my half-sister, who was originally raised at the estate, back to the mansion. They cared for her meticulously and named her Tang Ningyu. As I faltered, unsure how to continue, Jingheng suddenly reached out and brushed away the stray hairs at my temple. His voice was as light as pearls and jade falling upon my heart. Did my lady ever have a childhood name? I shook my head. How about I think of a pet name for you, my lady? He dipped his brush and wrote. When my lady smiles so radiantly, it stirs one's soul. How about Yang Yang as your pet name? I suddenly looked up, staring at him in a daze. At this moment, Jingheng's face so close to mine strangely overlapped with the gentle smile of my mother in my memories. Back then I was still young. She would hold me while teaching me to read. When we came to the poem Mang, she would stroke my hair and say softly, Yang Yang, look, this is your childhood name. Yang Xiao Yang Yang carries the meaning of harmony and joy, but I don't wish for you to be overly harmonious and submissive. That would ultimately be no good. Word for word, the words still ring in my ears. In the blink of an eye, her lifeless, cold corpse lay before me. My furious father approached with a whip in hand, only to be stopped by my stepmother. After all, Xiaoer is still a daughter of the Tang family. Her mother has done such shameless things. Who knows if she's even a true daughter of our Tang family at all? He glared at me with disgust. From now on, just raise her as a lowly servant girl. The Tang family has only Tingyu as its daughter. Yang Yang, Jing Heng's voice called out with a sigh. I suddenly snapped back to reality and wiped away my tears in a fluster. He reached out, drew me into his embrace, and gently stroked my hair. You're married now, so your parents' attention naturally shifts elsewhere. But you're my wife now. Whatever wishes you have, you can tell me. What wishes did I have? What I want is for my stepmother to come back to life. I also want the lives of the Tang family. But these are things I can never speak aloud, fearing discovery. The vial of poison Tang Ningyu gave me was carefully hidden close to my body. Before I could make my move, Jing Heng unexpectedly met with misfortune first. That evening, he returned from an errand and joined me for dinner. Halfway through a bowl of perch and water shield soup, Jing Heng suddenly turned pale, tilted his head to the side, and spat out a mouthful of blood. An icy dread surged through me. I shot to my feet, staring at him in horror as my heart plummeted into an unfathomable abyss. Jing Heng braced himself against the table, slowly raising his eyes to look at me. In the dim candlelight, his long hair cascaded over his shoulders, making his jade-pale face appear even more bloodless, while the traces of blood at the corner of his lips formed a stark, glaring crimson. Madam, he called to me in a weak voice. Come help me up, I can barely stand. I forced myself to ignore the fleeting pain in my heart upon hearing these words, reached out to steady him, and opened my mouth to call for Xiao, but no sound came out. Fortunately, Xiao was quick-witted and noticed the scene when she came in to serve the soup. Jing Heng was poisoned with a highly toxic substance, but fortunately, he didn't drink much, so it wasn't life-threatening. When his trusted aides searched the area, they actually found the white jade vial in my jewelry box. Upon opening it, it was confirmed to contain the poison. The guard named Aaron stared at me with a face full of murderous intent, as if he might draw his sword at any moment to give me a quick death. The prince has never treated the princess with the slightest neglect. Why would the princess resort to such vicious means? At this moment, I truly loathed my mute character setting. I couldn't even manage to defend myself with a few words. Seeing that I couldn't speak, Aaron waved his hand. First, take the person away and lock her in the dungeon. We'll deal with her after the prince wakes up. Just as the people behind him were about to grab me, a low, hoarse voice came from the bed behind me. No need. Jing Heng, who had been in a coma, had woken up at some point. His face was still pale, but his gaze, fixed on my face, was as bright as a sea of stars. Yang Yang, come. I walked over to Jing Heng under everyone's gaze, sat down close beside him, and wrote in his palm, stroke by stroke. It wasn't me. He coughed lightly into his hand twice, and said with a weak, smiling voice, Of course I believe my wife, but your highness, your subordinate found in the princess's jewelry box. Aaron couldn't help but say anxiously, holding up the white jade bottle, trying to use it as evidence against me. It couldn't be Yang Yang. Her heart and soul are devoted to me, so how could she bear to poison me? This jade bottle must also be a setup, Jing Heng said indifferently. I'll leave this matter to you to investigate. Aaron glared at me, then reluctantly accepted the order, saying, yes, once all the servants had left the room and the door closed. I looked at Jing Heng's pale face, flickering in the candlelight, and met his gaze fixed on me. Yang Yang, I don't have the strength to hold you anymore, he said softly. Don't be afraid, I never doubted you. I just watched him in silence until he wearily closed his eyes. Perhaps it was the medicine the doctor prescribed taking effect, or perhaps it was a lingering after-effect of the poison that hadn't fully dissipated. It's not that I'm ungrateful. When Aaron was about to drag me to the dungeon, and Jing Heng spoke up to stop him, saying without hesitation that he believed it wasn't me, his deep and tender gaze fell upon my face, almost making me believe that he truly loved me deeply and trusted me profoundly. But how could it be such a coincidence? How could Jing Heng, a man so ruthless, meticulous, and cautious, have been poisoned so easily? Unless, I spent the entire night by Jing Heng's bedside, my heart in turmoil, until he woke up the next morning, seeing my hesitant gaze. He coughed twice and whispered, "Does my lady have something to tell me?" I nodded, fetched paper and pen, and wrote for him to see. At such a critical juncture yesterday, my husband trusted me so implicitly. My heart is deeply touched, and I feel I can never repay such kindness. Jing Heng suddenly laughed. Then wait until I'm fully recovered. He narrowed his eyes, the corners of his lips curving into a smile, making the mole on his cheek appear even more beautiful. My lady, there will always be a time for you to repay me. Jing Heng was true to his word. Once the poison dissipated, he indeed made me repay him handsomely. During this time, the Tang family sent more people over, claiming that my stepmother missed her daughter dearly and wished to see me. However, Jing Heng turned them away, citing my ill health. I knew perfectly well that they were there to inquire about the progress of the poisoning. Unfortunately, Ran confiscated all the poison bottles as evidence, so there's no way I can poison anyone now. During the day, while Jing Heng was out on business, I wandered around the manor and, without realizing it, found myself in the small kitchen. The room was filled with the sweet scent of osman. Thus, after a couple of sniffs, a quick-witted little maid picked up a plate and offered it to me. Freshly baked osman, thus honey cakes. Your Highness, please try this servant's cooking. Seeing my delight, the little maidservant brought me an entire basket of them, holding it with a cloth pad herself, and followed behind me. It's hot. I'll take it to the princess's room. Unexpectedly, as soon as I stepped through the courtyard gate, Xiao rushed up to greet me. Where did the princess go? My expression tightened, and I lowered my gaze to look at her. Xiao seemed to just realize her gaffe, paused, and whispered, the princess consort may go anywhere in the manor, but it's nothing, please. Princess consort, do not approach the prince's study. It is heavily guarded, and those men are unfeeling. I fear they might harm the princess consort. Study. I raised an eyebrow, walked into the room first, and wrote to her. I was just hungry and went to the small kitchen to find something to eat. You really don't need to be so nervous. This servant was just worried about your highness. I ignored her and turned to write, asking the young maid behind me, what is your name, your highness? This servant is Xiaoan. I was somewhat surprised. You can read. My father was a scholar and taught me some characters before I entered the household. Xiao grabbed a handful of silver melon seeds and gave them to her. All right, you may return to your duties now. This is the princess's reward for you. After that day, I began to frequently visit the small kitchen to look for Xiaoan. Her cooking was excellent. She made many pastries and would stew tender pork hock for me. Her temperament was also exceptionally good. Once we became familiar, she would always chatter on and on to me. Perhaps it was because I went to the small kitchen to find Xiaoan every day, staying for half the day, that even Jingheng became aware of it. At night, when the wind and rain had ceased, he brushed the sweat from my forehead and suddenly said, I heard Yang Yang has been quite close with a maid from the small kitchen recently. What? Does she please Yang Yang that much? I forced my aching arm to right and asked him, My lord, are you jealous even of a maid? He glanced at it, then suddenly buried his face in my shoulder and chuckled softly twice. Since Yang Yang knows how jealous I am, why doesn't she keep her distance? Me, I was just teasing. How could he admit it so readily? A moment later, Jingheng's smile faded. He raised his hand, his fingertips gently caressing my eyes. My lady, my heart is very small, it can only hold you now, but if my lady keeps looking at others, I will be heartbroken. His voice still carried a hint of the languor of fading desire, but by the end, it had gained an unexpected sharpness, cutting through the mist. Had I not timely recalled whose identity I was currently assuming, I would have almost taken his display of possessiveness seriously. Alas, I sighed inwardly, if you truly hate Tang Tingyu so much, why not just send someone to kill her, a quick and clean death? As it is now, you're tormenting me. At the break of dawn, Jingheng finally deigned to show mercy and let me go. For the next several days, I was utterly exhausted, with no energy left to seek out Xiao Wn in the small kitchen, until that evening, craving a bowl of crab roe wontons, I set aside my book and went to the small kitchen alone to find Xiao Wn. However, as I passed Jingheng's study, I suddenly heard a familiar, sharp cry coming from inside. I paused, changed direction, but was stopped at the door by two sword-wielding guards. They said with stern faces, The prince is handling important matters. Please return, princess, lest you be harmed. I pretended not to hear, lifted my skirt, and walked in, only to bump into Xiao. She softly called out, Your Highness, but dared not say anything more, because just 5 steps ahead, under the deepening twilight, the frail figure lying lifeless on the bluestone ground was none other than Xiao Wn. and standing on the steps before her, holding a blood-soaked long sword, with a faint smile playing on his lips yet eyes filled with chilling frost. Jingheng, you should have learned the rules when you first entered the manor. My study is absolutely off-limits to outsiders, no matter what. And touching that box is a death sentence, he said with a smile, as if in casual conversation. Now that you've broken the rules, I pity your youth and will give you a quick end. Do you have any objections? Naturally, none. The dead raise no objections. Perhaps the commotion at the door caught his attention, and Jingheng looked over. He stood in the deepening twilight, and as his gaze fell upon my face, the night sky precisely swallowed the last sliver of golden-red sunlight. Those eyes, which had been so passionately tender last night, were now as calm and unruffled as a winter ice lake. Yet coincidentally, a hint of poignant affection seeped out from the cracks in the lake's surface. Yang Yang, he called my name. Come here, come to my side. I was wearing the newly made dress from a few days ago, its long hem embroidered with intricate water-red flowers, nearly sweeping the ground, as I walked step by step toward Jingheng. The hem trailed through the bloodstains on the floor, the crimson color creeping up the fabric. Jingheng acted as if he didn't see it. He took my hand and gently coaxed me. This maid broke the rules, so I killed her. Did it scare you, my lady? I instinctively wanted to shake my head, but then remembering my current status, I nodded instead. The small kitchen will have new maids to replace her. My lady, you can personally choose the kind you like. His warm fingertips, stained with blood, lightly brushed past my ear. Yang Yang, don't be afraid, I would never treat you the way I treated her. But these words sounded no different to me than don't worry, I'll treat you just as I treated her, because at this moment, I suddenly awoke from my self-deluding fantasy and remembered Jingheng's true identity. His notorious reputation precedes him, ruthless methods, human lives as insignificant as grass to him. Moreover, in his eyes now, I am Tang Tingyu, the one who once publicly humiliated him. Fine silks and splendid robes may numb me for a time, but I should not be lost in them until death. That night, I took the initiative to seek intimacy, catering to his desires with such flattery that even Jingheng couldn't help but wonder, why is my wife suddenly so passionate? I shook my head, gazing at him tenderly, yet my mind was elsewhere, deep in thought. If he treasures that small box so dearly, it must hold his vital weakness. So after a few days, I chose a late night when he was away on official business. I climbed out through the window, avoiding Xiao and the two marshal-trained servants, and silently slipped into Jingheng's study. This was my first time in his study. The room was filled with a cool, woody fragrance, perfectly complemented by the half-ground ink on the desk and the moonlight seeping through the window lattice, creating an atmosphere of serene quietude. I glanced around and went to search the shelves for the box, but was momentarily overwhelmed by the sea of books. Yang Yang, the familiar voice, tinged with a hint of amusement, sounded behind me. My dear Yang Yang, the night is deep and all is quiet. Since you refuse to sleep, have you come to your husband's place seeking some romantic tales to while away the time? My movements froze instantly. Hesitation flickered in my heart for only a brief moment before I drew the dagger at my waist and turned to thrust it toward his eyes. Yet every move I made was effortlessly blocked by him, as if he was intimately familiar with each of my limited techniques. In the end, Jingheng gripped my wrist with unyielding force. He exerted enough strength that the pain made me relent, and the dagger clattered to the ground, under the pale moonlight. He pressed me against the windowsill, his gaze tracing my face like the edge of a sharp blade. Yang Yang, you once shed tears for me, but now, you truly wish to kill me, don't you? His tone sounded as if he were genuinely heartbroken. In this situation, I could no longer keep up the pretense of being mute. Gritting my teeth, I said, Jingheng, let me go. Yang Yang can't keep pretending anymore. He still had the leisure to smile, leaning closer inch by inch. You're naturally talkative these past few days since the marriage. It must have been quite a struggle for you, hasn't it? He had known all along that I was pretending, these past few days. This person has indeed been toying with me. I couldn't help but feel ashamed of the sudden surge of disappointment that welled up within me. Jingheng's lips stopped just a hair's breadth away, passively dragging me back into those many nights of intoxicated passion from before. Even half an hour ago, He and I were still entangled in sober awareness. Jingheng traced my eyelids with his fingertips, his voice a low murmur. These past days, you've performed quite well too. Didn't you like the clothes and jewelry I gave you? Why couldn't we simply turn pretense into reality? Perhaps illusions may intoxicate me momentarily, but surely not until the blades at my throat would I realize something's amiss. Jingheng, you killed Xiao Wn to make a point to me, didn't you? I took a deep breath. Now that I've entered your study and touched your box too, how will you kill me? Will you grant me a quick death as well? The night wind blew in through the gaps in the window frame, stealing the warmth from his fingertips. That icy chill lingered against the side of my neck, as if it might tighten at any moment and strangle me. I couldn't help but dig my nails into my palm, staring at him intently, only to hear his voice the next instant. How could I bear to? You promised to repay me that day. Yang Yang, it's not over yet. He smiled at me in the dim light. Why not right here? The book that was brushed aside fell to the ground, along with the 24 pleated skirts of water-red silk embroidered with snow-white pear blossoms, until dawn broke. Perhaps the night wind was too cold. When the morning light began to glow faintly, Jingheng carried me back to the room, and soon I developed a fever. In my dazed state, fragments of the past came back to me intermittently. My days in the Tang household had never been easy. There was a time when my birth mother still protected me. But after her death, with the tacit approval of the legal wife, even the lowest servant in the Tang family could trample over me and act like a tyrant. Though I was born a year earlier than Tang Tingyu, we shared the same birthday. On her birthday, gold, silver, jewels, and fine silks flowed into her chamber like water for her to choose from, while I hid in the kitchen secretly cooking a bowl of noodles. Even that would be snatched away and eaten by the servants delivering dishes, who would then glare at me with hands on their hips and sneer, "How dare you steal from the small kitchen without permission from the master, mistress, or eldest young lady?" Tang Tingyu hated me to the core. I knew, she always believed that misfortunes like falling ill and becoming mute should have happened to me instead. In her flawless life, such a thing had actually occurred. Truly, the heavens were blind. If you ask me, this was the only time the heavens ever opened their eyes. The butler deprived me of supper that night, starving until my chest stuck to my back. I sat beneath a tree rubbing my belly as I gazed at the moon, unable to stop thinking of my mother. My father would occasionally visit her courtyard, praising her for being gentle, elegant, and free from gossip. He had taken in too many concubines of all types. But due to the methods of the legal wife, none of the other concubines bore him any children. Before entering the Tang household, my birth mother was an embroiderer, skilled in needlework. She was quiet and submissive by nature. But I was rebellious, refusing to learn embroidery or show the slightest submission. I even saved 2 years' worth of allowance to buy a small silver dagger, which I kept close to me, often taking it out to practice my moves. At such times, my stepmother would look at me with a smile and say, "Yang Yang will grow up to be a female general." Yet in the end, I disappointed her. I did not become a female general. My meager rebellious spirit was trapped layer by propriety and the rules of the inner chambers, so much so that I couldn't even resist my fate. I ended up marrying into the regent's palace in Tang Tingyu's stead, becoming a caged bird once more. It seems that for generations, women born with shackles have always met such a fate. After her death, Tang Tingyu once came to the backyard to see me. At that time, she hadn't yet fallen ill. Her pretty mouth could still speak, though unfortunately, the words weren't particularly pleasant. She leaned toward me with a smile, her voice sweet as honey, yet laced with venom like a poisonous flower. "Look at your mother. Had she known her place, you could at least have been a daughter of the Tang family." But she was shameless. Her behavior vile, dragging you down into bastardy. Do you hate her? I suddenly opened my eyes to the sound of rain pattering outside the window. Xiao rushed over with a look of delight. "The princess consort is awake. You've been unconscious for a full day with a raging fever." I parted my lips. "Where is Jingheng?" Xiao's expression instantly turned to shock. "The princess consort can speak." I was also shocked. What? Did Jingheng not tell them about me impersonating Tang Tingyu? In my daze, Xiao clapped her hands and said cheerfully, "If the prince knew about this, he would surely be very pleased. But, my lady, Why the sudden change? I noticed her confusion and forced a dry laugh. Perhaps it's a medical miracle. Yet even after I had lunch and taken my medicine, I still hadn't seen Jingheng. Xiao said, "Last night there was an urgent summons from the palace, commanding His Highness to attend an audience. His Highness didn't return all night. But before leaving he specifically instructed us maids to take good care of the princess consort, saying if, I frowned, if what? If the queen's maternal relatives come to the door, just stop them outside and don't allow them to see her." In just a few words, I detected a trace of gloom, like the oppressive stillness before a storm, when the late emperor was still alive. Due to his disdain for Jingheng's mother, even he was not favored. Jingheng wandered among the common people for 4 years, and the late emperor never once thought to bring him back. Yet, on his deathbed, he went to great lengths to do so, likely because the new emperor was young, and the princes in the palace were all eyeing the throne, fearing instability in the empire. But now, as the new emperor grows older and his power strengthens, he seeks to reclaim his authority. Jingheng's presence, once a pillar of support, has now become a threat. Recalling how the Tang family, after allying with the Marquis of Chongning, forced me to poison Jingheng, it seems His Majesty is growing impatient. Thinking of Jingheng's uncertain fate, the candlelight flickering all night in his study, and his careless teasing and favor these past days all tangled together into a mist lingering in my heart. Perhaps parting the mist would reveal the truth, but for now, I find myself unwilling, lost in thought. A familiar voice suddenly came from the doorway. Yang. I suddenly looked up. Jingheng stood at the door in dark robes, his ink-black hair loose, leaning against the doorframe. His face was pale, yet a smile rippled across it like a breeze skimming the surface of a lake, stirring sudden waves. Xiao tactfully withdrew, leaving only the two of us in the room. A faint scent of blood wafted from Jingheng. He must have just narrowly escaped death. After a moment of silence, he walked toward me, step by step, like drumbeats falling upon my heart. Subconsciously, I tried to guess what he would say, whether it would be like that night in the study, ruthless yet tinged with desperate sorrow, or like so many times before, teasing words where I couldn't tell if they held truth or pretense. But there was nothing. He stopped before me, raising his hand to gently brush my cheek. "If I don't return from this journey, Yang, in the decades of your remaining life, could you spare a moment to remember me?" Though reason told me Jingheng was most likely playing the pity card, but during these months of acting out false affections, I couldn't deny there were moments of genuine feeling. After a brief silence, I finally spoke calmly. "I am your wedded wife. Should you not return from this journey, I shall don mourning white, remove my hairpins, and observe widowhood for 3 years. A smile welled up in Jingheng's eyes. He turned his head aside, coughed twice, and was about to speak. "But now, since you know I am not Tang Tingyu, nor the legitimate daughter of the Tang family, our marriage can be terminated. With a letter of divorce, I will immediately move out of the regent's mansion and make way for the real Tang Tingyu," I added. The smile in his eyes vanished instantly, and Jingheng sighed. "How could my wife think that the person I want to marry is her? Isn't it because she once publicly humiliated you on the street? And now that you've risen to a high position, you hold a grudge and want to get revenge on her?" Jingheng narrowed his eyes, a curve forming on his lips. "What is she, that she's worth me using my own marriage to get revenge? What, is your marriage so precious? Counting me, you've been married 3 times already, haven't you?" I didn't speak. But Jingheng seemed to read my thoughts, sighing softly. "Those 2 previous wives who supposedly died on their wedding night were both sent to kill me. Yang, tell me, if I don't kill them, what then?" I scoffed. "You could just have someone watch them, just like you arranged for Xiao to watch me. Does Madam think I arranged for Xiao to serve you in order to spy on you?" Jingheng suddenly laughed aloud, but the mirth didn't reach his eyes. In fact, he looked slightly cold. He reached out and pulled me into his embrace, the movement intensifying the scent of blood that lingered around us. That handsome face drew near, pressing against my cheek, and with each word he spoke, I could feel even the slightest tremor. Why would my lady rather keep the Tang family's spies by her side than see Xiao? The gesture was too intimate. The warmth where our skin touched sent a shiver through me. Trembling all the way to the depths of my heart, he inhaled sharply. then said slowly, word by word, "I want to marry you, Tang Yang Yang. From the very beginning, the one I wanted to marry was always you. We were too close, every sensation was magnified endlessly. Instinctively, I wanted to step back, but his hand reached over and gripped my chin, not allowing me to escape. Why?" Jing Heng did not answer me. Suddenly, a weight pressed down on my shoulder. Sensing something was wrong, I reached out and turned his face, only to find Jing Heng's eyes tightly shut. He had fainted. The shoulder I was holding felt wet. I lifted my hand to see it stained crimson. Tearing open Jing Heng's collar, I discovered a deep, bone-revealing wound on his shoulder, as if pierced by a sharp blade. I gasped softly. What exactly happened on the night I was feverish and unconscious? And he entered the palace, in the face of life and death. The origin of love temporarily lost its meaning. I ultimately used all my strength, with some difficulty, to lift Jing Heng and place him on the bed. Then I went outside and called out to Xiao, "The prince has fainted, and his wounds are quite severe. Go fetch a doctor." Xiao urgently assented and ran out a few steps, then suddenly stopped, turning to look at me. "I have studied martial arts since childhood and was originally a hidden guard by the prince's side. A few months ago, after the princess married in, I was ordered by the prince to protect her, not to monitor her." I gazed at her. The regent's mansion is not a monolithic entity. The prince, being in a high position, has thus become a target for all. Ministers are wary, and the emperor's heart is suspicious. But the prince's affection for the princess is absolutely genuine. Xiao curtsied and quickly departed. I returned to the bed, looking down at the unconscious Jing Heng. Because his eyes were closed, there was no sparkle in them, but the flickering candlelight cast a warm glow on his pale, bloodless face. Somehow, I recalled half a month ago, when Jing Heng returned from his duties. I was sitting at the table eating when he picked me up, placed me on his lap, and leaned down to kiss me. That kiss was fervent and passionate, carrying a hint of ruthlessness, as if he wanted to devour me whole. Yet a large hand came from behind, carefully supporting the back of my head. I clutched his lapels, my heart and fingertips trembling in unison. It was a long time before I heard his voice, laced with a sigh. "This journey was perilous. Thanks to you, my lady, I was able to escape safely." I wrote in his palm. "What does that have to do with me? 2 days ago, before I left the manor, I wanted to kiss you, my lady, but you were sleeping so soundly, I couldn't bring myself to do it. At the brink of life and death, I couldn't help but think of you. You still owe me a kiss, my lady." As he spoke, night had fallen, and his eyes reflected the flickering candlelight on the table, like a whirlpool. I couldn't help but lose myself, as if my whole being was drawn into it. How could I not be moved? Though confined to my chambers, I had heard whispers from the outside world. Jing Heng's hands were stained with too much blood. Countless people hated him enough to wish him dead, and because he held such immense power, even more people wanted to drag him down, cast him into the dust, and then take his place. I pursed my lips and reached out to brush the disheveled strands of hair from his temple behind his ear, only to see his lashes flutter slightly as he opened his eyes. His gaze was hazy with unshed tears, as if he wasn't fully awake yet, still lost in dreams. He looked at me dazedly and called out in a hoarse voice, "Shamai." Suddenly, I felt as though I'd plunged into an icy abyss. Jing Heng was gravely injured this time. The blade had lodged itself into his shoulder bone before being brutally yanked out. The physician said he'd also been drinking, yet stubbornly rode his horse back to the manor, the wound becoming further mangled from the jostling. For 3 consecutive days, Jing Heng wavered between consciousness and unconsciousness. I remained by his bedside the entire time, moving even the physician to remark, "The princess's devotion to his highness is as evident as the sun and moon." I chuckled dryly. "I just don't want to be buried alive with him, that's all." The physician, seeing my troubled expression, dared not utter another sound. It wasn't as if I hadn't read those erotic novels. I knew exactly what the word substitute implied. Recalling Jing Heng's tender intimacy from the very beginning of our acquaintance, and the way he murmured junior sister in his delirium that night, I suddenly felt the uncontrollable flutter in my heart was rather embarrassing. On the 4th day, Jing Heng finally awoke, his fever broken. "For the past few days, I've been bedridden, and the wound on my shoulder has been freshly gouged. leaving his handsome face shrouded in a bloodless pallor. Looking down at him, he appeared beautiful and fragile. The moment he opened his eyes and saw me, he was clearly in good spirits. "Thank you for always staying by my side, Yang Yang," I said sarcastically. "What's so hard about it? It's just the basic etiquette of a stand-in." Seeing his hazy eyes gaze innocently at me, I felt a sudden tightness in my chest and shortness of breath. I turned and walked away, saying, "I'll go check if the medicine in the kitchen is ready." For the next few days, my tone with Jingheng was far from gentle, yet his gaze remained deep and tolerant as he looked at me, as if he truly loved me deeply. Finally, I could bear it no longer. I forcefully placed the medicine bowl on the table and said coldly, "Since you are so deeply in love with your junior sister, you should find a way to marry her. Instead, you married me, pretended to have feelings for me, and then secretly pined for her every day." Jingheng looked at me in astonishment. I let out a long breath. "You didn't expect me to have found out already, did you?" "Jingheng, that day you called your junior sister's name while unconscious. It already exposed your true feelings. There's no need to act in front of me anymore." He had been leaning against the headboard, his expression still showing a hint of weariness, but upon hearing this, he actually turned his head slightly, covering his lips as he began to laugh. His movements were too broad, likely tearing at the unhealed wound on his shoulder, causing Jingheng's face to pale slightly. Yet, the light in his eyes shimmered, a dazzling and captivating brilliance. After he finished laughing, he finally composed himself and said, "Yes, I do have a junior sister, TSK. Couldn't keep up the act, could he? Though she comes from a prestigious family, because she is a concubine's daughter, she receives no affection from her birth father, and has been deliberately tormented by her legitimate mother and elder sister for years. Good heavens, even her life story is so similar to mine." It seems Jingheng put quite a bit of effort into choosing me as a substitute. Although she and I are fellow disciples, she has never seen me. When I was living among the common people, I was fortunate enough to be taught by a master. He taught me the art of killing and the way of control, but I was lazy by nature. One spring, he disappeared for half a month before returning, and the first thing he did was boast to me that he had been pursued by enemies and was gravely injured when he was saved by a young girl, out of gratitude. He taught her the simplest killing techniques, therefore, she can also be considered my junior sister. As he spoke, he gazed at me with intense concentration, his emotions rippling like sudden waves on a lake, and by the end, I couldn't help but show a look of shock on my face. Later, he offered to help her seek revenge, but his junior sister refused, saying vengeance was her own affair. Even if she burned down that family's mansion, she alone should bear the responsibility. Upon hearing this, I grew curious and secretly sneaked into that household for a look. To my surprise, the legitimate elder sister who was giving my junior sister trouble turned out to be none other than Tang Tingyu, the same woman who had once scattered copper coins all over me in the streets. Finding her too noisy, I casually poisoned her mute, then perched on the eaves to watch over my junior sister. Earlier, I had journeyed to the far northern lands. Arriving at the transition between winter and spring, the wilderness was swept by biting winds, yet spring grass was sprouting new buds amidst the harshness. One could glimpse signs of life. Junior sister's eyes resemble the spring wilderness of the far north. I fell in love with her at first sight. During those years in the Tang family's backyard, I did save someone. An old man with graying hair, covered in blood, collapsed right outside my window. After a moment's hesitation, I still dragged him back to the room, used a small silver knife sterilized by fire to cut away the blackened flesh from his wound, and then applied crushed hemostatic herbs. Later, when his injuries healed, to express his gratitude, he taught me how to recognize martial artists, gave me a gem-encrusted dagger, and even showed me a few deadly killing techniques. Those were the very moves I tried to use against Jingheng in his study that midnight. No wonder Jingheng could effortlessly block every one of my strikes, because he had learned the same moves earlier than I had. He was naturally more familiar with them. No wonder Tang Tingyu, the heavens-favored daughter who was showered with love, suddenly fell mysteriously ill and then became unable to speak. It wasn't that the heavens had occasionally opened their eyes to punish a villain, but rather that it had been man-made from the very beginning. Jingheng studied my expression and suddenly chuckled lightly. So, is my wife jealous of herself? My ears burned crimson with embarrassment as I retorted defiantly, since you're so deeply infatuated with me, were you certain from the very beginning that I would replace Tang Tingyu and marry you? Weren't you afraid Tang Tingyu might covet your beauty so desperately that she'd risk retaliation just to marry you and indulge in momentary pleasure? Jingheng curled his lips slightly. Tang Tingyu's thoughts are irrelevant to me, but now it seems my wife does indeed covet my beauty quite openly. Me, however, had it truly been Tang Tingyu who married me as you suggested, he said, slightly narrowing his eyes with an exceedingly beautiful smile. I'm afraid the rumors in the capital will need updating again. Rumors, indeed. The regent Prince Jingheng has married 3 consorts, all of whom died suddenly on their wedding night. It seems he was born with a fate that brings misfortune to his wives. He spoke with such nonchalance, as if killing Tang Tingyu would be easier than slaughtering a chicken. I fell into silence. For a long time in the past, Tang Tingyu had been like a shadow cast over my life. When my birth mother was still alive, I once naively asked her, why does father favor my elder sister by his first wife, yet always looks right through me, whenever this happened? Mother would hold me tightly and whisper apologies in her gentle voice, but she was the last person who needed to apologize. Envious that Tang Tingyu had her father by her side on her birthday, the following year on my own birthday, my mother mustered the courage for the first time to stop my father in the garden, hoping he would spend even just a cup of tea's worth of time with me. But how could she have known that he was in a foul mood that day due to court affairs? Hearing her plea, it was as if he had finally found an outlet for his frustration. He raised his hand and struck her to the ground, sneering with disgust. A mere concubine-born daughter, how dare you use your birthday as an excuse to vie for favor over your legitimate sister? Father stormed back to his study, while Tang Tingyu stood behind, holding her stepmother's hand with a faint smile on her lips. How could third concubine be in such a sorry state? Truly, those from humble backgrounds can't present themselves properly. Thinking of using her daughter to compete for favor, her stepmother feigned reproach. Tingyu, that's enough, hold your tongue. After all, third concubine is your elder. She's just a concubine. What kind of elder is she to me? She snorted coldly and threw an old hairpin to the ground. Take it back, third aunt. Consider it my birthday gift to my sister. The concubine took that silver hairpin, along with her pair of silver earrings, to the jewelry shop to have them melted down. She had a new silver bracelet made and brought it to me, saying that my father was too busy with official duties to celebrate my birthday with me, and that this was a gift he had specially prepared for me. At the time, I believed it to be true. It wasn't until 3 months later, when I overheard the idle chatter of the servants in the household, that I learned the truth of what had happened that day. From then on, I no longer envied Tang Tingyu, nor did I ever tell my stepmother again that I wanted my father to visit me. I practiced with my little silver knife, studied hard to read and write, fantasizing that one day in the future, I could break free from the Tang family's vast quagmire and take my stepmother with me to live a good life. But I never lived to see that day. Lost in memories, I suddenly felt a warm, gentle force cover the back of my hand. Coming to my senses, I found Jingheng holding my hand, whispering softly, after you married me, I deceived you and teased you repeatedly. That was my fault. To make it up to Yang Yang, shall I kill Tang Tingyu for you and destroy the Tang family? After a moment of silence, I replied quietly, I do have feelings for you, but I don't want to use you. Husband and wife are one. How could helping Yang Yang be considered using me? He gently wrapped his arm around my waist, his eyes gazing directly into mine from such close proximity, the flickering candlelight dancing like a river of stars in the mortal world. The sharp lines of his jaw were slightly softened by the loose strands of his ink-black hair. Perhaps because of his injury, Jingheng didn't use much strength. Yet my fingers suddenly went weak, and my heart pounded wildly in my chest. He was right. I truly, utterly coveted his beauty, swallowing my saliva carefully. I was just about to lean in to kiss him when I heard Jingheng's voice. Besides, perhaps one day in the future I might find myself in dire straits and need Yang Yang to come rescue me. The trailing words were swallowed up in my kiss. Jingheng was clearly pleased by my initiative. his eyes crinkling with a smile as he obediently let me proceed. Only, at the time, I thought those words were merely Jing Heng's attempt to comfort me, fearing I might feel burdened. Little did I know that day would arrive so soon. Half a month later, Jing Heng's wounds had fully healed. I finally learned what had happened in the palace that night. He had been summoned by the emperor with an imperial decree, thinking it was another secret mission. Unexpectedly, the emperor had prepared a small banquet in his chambers, inviting him along with Marquis Changning and the seventh prince to dine. After 3 rounds of drinks, the emperor suddenly spoke up with a casual smile. "I heard there's a mysterious box in third brother's study. Any servant who touches it must die. I can't help but wonder what important thing that box contains." Jing Heng took a sip of wine, propped his chin lazily, and smiled. "Just some worthless trinkets. Why should your majesty concern yourself with such things?" The seventh prince said, "I heard that when our late father was on his deathbed, he summoned third brother to the palace and left behind a secret edict. Could that be what's inside the box?" The word secret edict carried extraordinary significance for these imperial princes. The emperor's smile grew even fainter. "Although third brother and I are not born of the same mother, he has assisted me greatly since my ascension to the throne, for which I am deeply grateful. Without third brother, the great Jew's stability might truly be in jeopardy." The hidden meaning and displeasure in these words were unmistakable to all who heard them. "I am willing to vouch for the regent prince. His Highness is undoubtedly loyal to your majesty and the great Zhou dynasty." The Marquis of Ningyuan suddenly knelt down, first bowing his head in salute to Jing Heng before turning his gaze to the emperor. At this sight, the emperor's expression grew even more displeased, the faint curve at the corner of his lips vanishing completely. Meanwhile, the seventh prince rose to his feet and cupped his hands toward the emperor. "Recently, while reading, I came across an anecdote during the previous dynasty. Prime Minister Zhong Wei, to demonstrate his loyalty and patriotism, went so far as to cut open his own heart as proof, ultimately becoming a minister of peerless loyalty remembered throughout the ages." The two men played off each other until they both fell silent and turned their gaze to Jing Heng. The hall was filled with a chilling solemnity. Jing Heng held his wine cup, smiling faintly yet meaningfully. "Does seventh brother wish for me to follow Zhong Wei's example and cut open my heart to prove my innocence?" "Not at all. I merely read a few books recently and thought to share them with third brother and his majesty for amusement." Jing Heng curled his lips slightly. "How rare indeed. It's been years since seventh brother last touched a book. Yet today you suddenly remember." As he spoke, I couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat for him. How dare you contradict the seventh prince in front of the emperor like that? He wouldn't dare say such things on his own. It must have been the emperor's intention for him to speak that way. Jing Heng blinked. "I know, that's why I proved it to him. I thought of the deep, bone-revealing wound on his shoulder that night. And after a moment of stunned silence, I suddenly realized, you inflicted that wound on yourself. Naturally. Then why strike such a merciless blow? Couldn't you have just put on a show?" Jing Heng sighed. "If not for such a ruthless strike, I fear Yang Yang would not be able to see me now." I pursed my lips, a bitter ache in my heart. He was infamous. Even when I was still unmarried and confined to the Tang Manor's backyard, I had heard those terrifying rumors. However, now that I've married into the regent's household and spent this time with Jing Heng, exchanging true feelings, I've finally come to realize, to stabilize the empire, decisive and forceful measures are essential, and with such mercilessness, someone is bound to bear the infamy. However, under the late emperor's arrangements, the one who bore the ill repute was Jing Heng, but the one who sat firmly on the throne was not him. Now that the court officials are loyal to the emperor and the people live in peace, it's time for me to retire successfully. Jing Heng raised his hand and stroked my hair. "Of course, before I retire to become a leisurely prince. I still have one last thing to do for Yang Yang. The downfall of the Tang family is a good thing for you and me, and for Da Ju." Seeing that I was still staring at him intently, with a serious expression, Jing Heng softened his voice to coax me. "Well, these things are either in the past or in the future, but tonight is a perfect night. Why don't you spend it with me?" He was wearing a thin, white sleeping gown, slightly disheveled, and his jade-like skin was bathed in a soft, warm glow from the candlelight. Even the well-defined hand resting on my waistband felt particularly suggestive. I swallowed hard, then heard his low, husky whisper, as if tempting me, "These past few days, you've truly neglected your husband for too long." With that single sound, the last thread of reason in my mind snapped. Blinded by desire, I leaned in to kiss him like a debauched emperor infatuated with beauty, mumbling indistinctly, "Tell me then, what must I do to ensure I don't neglect you?" Jing Heng spread his hands innocently. "Your husband has just recovered from a serious injury and is weak all over. I can only leave myself to my wife's mercy." That night, the red candles burned all night long. It was as if, this time, everything had been turned upside down, and it was Jing Heng who was marrying me. He gasped slightly. "What is Yang Yang doing?" I sneered. "Husband, I remember very clearly what happened in the study that night." He gave up resisting, even sighing helplessly. What a vengeful girl. When I woke up the next day, it was already close to noon. Because Jing Heng was injured, an imperial decree had already arrived from the palace, ordering him to rest at home for 2 months and not to attend court every day. Jing Heng and I both knew very well that this was merely the emperor's first warning to strip him of his power. He is also wary. After all, the loyal and capable generals currently guarding the borders were all promoted by me. Civil officials may be able to govern the country, but it is the military officers who fight on the battlefield that protect the territory of our great Jew. So, what's in that box in the study is the tiger tally. After learning that even the emperor knew about the box, and combining it with what Xiao told me that day, I finally understood. Xiao Wan was sent by the emperor to monitor the regent's mansion, wasn't she? She deliberately approached me, and after repeatedly entering and exiting the inner courtyard, she figured out when your study's defenses were weakest each day, then secretly snuck in, didn't she? Xiao went to prepare breakfast, so Jing Heng styled my hair. This person is skillful and has excellent aesthetic taste. He rummaged through my jewelry box and finally chose a smoky purple butterfly hairpin to hang from the gilded coral comb, which was incredibly beautiful. Jing Heng examined it in the bronze mirror for a moment, revealing a satisfied expression, then took out a snail shell ink stick to draw my eyebrows. "Yes," he replied while meticulously drawing my eyebrows. "She possesses martial arts but has always hidden it well. The incident where I was poisoned was also her doing. I later had Ran investigate, and it took a great deal of effort to trace it back to her. I was shocked. I was just saying, I clearly kept that bottle of poison close to me. How did it suddenly end up in the jewelry box?" Before I could finish, I met Jing Heng's seemingly wounded eyes, and my voice abruptly stopped. After a pause, I whispered, "I never thought of poisoning you. Taking that bottle of poison was merely to temporarily appease my stepmother and Tang Tingyu. When I married, I brought almost everything my birth mother left me that I could take, but there was still a large double-sided embroidered screen left at the Tang residence. That screen, she spent a long time embroidering it during her lifetime, saying it was for my dowry. However, on the day of my wedding, my stepmother confiscated it. One day, I will go back and get it. I know you haven't thought about it, but if Madame truly wanted to kill me, there are many ways. For example," he leaned in, smiling, and whispered a few words into my ear. My face immediately flushed crimson, and I grabbed a comb and playfully hit him twice. When I tried to move again, Jing Heng caught my wrist and pressed it against the dressing table. "No more mischief, my lady. Xiao has already prepared lunch." After Jing Heng no longer had to attend court, he was clearly much more at ease. He even took me out of the manor to stroll around from time to time, and I visited every jewelry shop in the capital. That day, I was browsing books in a calligraphy and painting shop when suddenly there was some commotion at the entrance. Looking up, it was Tang Tingyu and an unfamiliar man. The man's face was quite handsome, but compared to Jing Heng by my side, he was far inferior. He must be the Marquis of Changning's heir, who is betrothed to Tang Tingyu. Tang Tingyu saw me and was slightly stunned, when her gaze fell upon Jing Heng, who was intimately close to me. Her expression suddenly became extremely unpleasant. The Marquis of Changning's heir asked, "Ningyu, I am Tang Tingyu, Ningyu's legitimate elder sister." I smiled. "I heard that my illegitimate younger sister and the crown prince are close to getting married. Congratulations." Jing Heng also cooperatively smiled beside me. So it's the illegitimate younger sister. I am Prince Jingheng, your legitimate elder sister's husband. What Tang Tingyu loved to use most to suppress me was her status as a legitimate daughter. But now, I have taken her place in marriage, and she is forced to become an illegitimate child, yet she cannot speak, not even to retort. Just thinking about it, I already felt bad for her. In the soft light, Jingheng lowered his head and carefully straightened my collar, then handed over the lotus seed sugar cake wrapped in oil paper, and gently asked, "Has my lady chosen her books?" He paid for me, put his arm around my shoulder, and walked out right in front of Tang Tingyu. Sure enough, shortly after returning to the manor, Xiao came to announce that a letter had arrived from the Tang residence, specifically addressed to me. I opened the letter in front of Jingheng, and together we enjoyed Tang Tingyu's exasperation. "Bitch, how dare you trick me? He's clearly infatuated with your foxy wiles, yet you told me he beat you every day and wouldn't even give you a full meal. What was your intention?" Turning to meet Jingheng's gaze, I felt a little guilty and turned my head away, but he pinched my chin, forcing me to look at him. "My wife says I beat you every day." I chuckled twice. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding. Before he could finish, Jingheng released his grip, rolled up his sleeve, and revealed 2 distinct red marks on his wrist. "Madam, do tell, how did these marks appear?" My ears burned hot, and Madam also said I don't feed you. I screamed and rushed to cover his mouth. Stop it, in broad daylight. There are other people in the mansion." To ease the restlessness, I distractedly picked up the letter and continued reading Tang Tingyu's words. Truthfully, there was nothing worth reading, just the same humiliating slights she'd repeated to me countless times. But when I reached the last line, my face suddenly turned pale. Jingheng noticed something was wrong and took the letter from my hand, reading it word by word. "Back when your little mother cheated and was unfaithful, I suppose she taught you those seductive tricks, didn't she? But even though she was rotten, her craftsmanship was truly excellent. I gladly accepted that double-sided embroidered screen." A double-sided embroidered screen. I bit my lip. It was a dowry left to me by my little mother before she passed, but my legitimate mother withheld it and never brought it over. He held my cold hand, his voice filled with gentle reassurance. "Don't worry, Yang Yang, I will retrieve it for you." The next morning, Jingheng, accompanied by dozens of his trusted personal guards, stormed into the Tang family estate with me. In front of my stepmother and father, he retrieved the screen from the storeroom. He took my hand and said gently, "My lady, take a look. Is this something your mother left for you?" Father's face darkened as he said, "Even if you are the regent king, to burst into my residence so rashly now is simply too rude." Jingheng said nonchalantly, "Then I invite Lord Tang to impeach this king before the emperor during tomorrow's court session." He had an arrogant attitude, and though my father was seething with anger, he dared not speak out, so he could only glare at me fiercely. I turned a blind eye, carefully inspecting the screen once more before replying, "Yes." Jingheng raised his hand slightly. "Take it back to the manor," my stepmother said to me with feigned helplessness. "Xiao, though you are a concubine's daughter, you are still a Tang family daughter after all. Allowing the prince to barge into your maiden home like this is a bit much." I curved my lips. "Madam Tang, your words are truly amusing. What is my status, and what is the regent prince's status? How could I possibly allow him?" My legitimate mother then looked at Jingheng again. "Regent prince, please don't take offense. Although Xiao is a concubine's daughter, she has been spoiled by us since childhood. When she heard that the prince came to propose marriage, she cried and insisted on marrying him as the princess consort in place of her sister. So we couldn't refuse and had to let her have her way. She's so good at fabricating stories. She should go tell tales at a tea house." After she finished speaking, Jingheng's expression remained calm, even lifting the corner of his lips into a carefree, charming smile. "In that case, it's truly a matter of fate between this prince and my lady." The principal mother's face stiffened. "Does the prince perhaps not understand the meaning of my words? How is Lady Tang questioning this prince?" Jingheng's eyes turned cold, sharply cutting over Tang Tingyu like a blade. "Ugly as a toad and ignorant as a fool. If such a person were to marry into the family, that would indeed be my misfortune." Tang Tingyu looked as if she would die from anger, but the prince's original choice for a bride, There was no original choice for a bride. Madam Tang, please hold your tongue. If you upset my wife and she stops speaking to me, you won't be able to compensate for that. My stepmother then came to me again, feigning concern and advising, since that is the case, Xiao you must treat the prince well. Do not, like your mother, flirt and carry on with other men. That would be truly improper. The anger and hatred that had accumulated over many years finally converged into a sea at this moment. I raised my hand and slapped her across the face, coldly saying, "How dare you mention my mother?" Tang Tingyu, who was standing nearby, suddenly rushed over to support her mother and glared at me with venom in her eyes. My father roared in anger and tried to charge forward,